Welcome everybody to A Little Perspective. This is your host Nikhil and this is your host Pranav. Today we had a very special guest, David Belof, a man with many talents, from a Saskatchewan Roughriders scorekeeper to a managing partner at Deloitte.
David's experience working in major firms across Canada added a glimpse of knowledge and wisdom into our conversation. I hope after listening to this episode, you all leave with a little perspective. Welcome everybody to A Little Perspective. Today we have a very special guest, David Belof, here with us today. How are you doing today, David?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
So far,
Pretty
so
good.
good?
Yeah?
Yeah? Pretty good.
Good.
How's your morning been so far?
It's been fantastic. You know, when you can wake up, it's the weather's nice, the sun is out, and I was able to get outside with the dogs a little bit and have my coffee. It's been good.
No better feeling?
That's right.
Awesome. So David, we usually start the podcast by, our guests telling us a bit about themselves, and just get the ball rolling that way. I want to start the podcast this time by you telling us how you started from working with the Roughriders all the way up to Deloitte, because those are such parallel, like completely different lives that you're living here.
Yeah.
How about we start from the very beginning?
Sure. Well, yeah, I can start there. I mean, we had a nice chat a couple of weeks ago about that. And it was really, one of the things we talked about is, Saskatchewan is really that, there's no 5 degrees of separation. There's 1 or 2 at most. And, this was a story of that started at home with the family. And mom and dad were having a big Christmas party, and they had all their friends over, and I was in university, and they asked me to stay there and bartend and just help them out and be an extra pair of hands. And I know everyone at the party anyway, so that was a lot of fun just to catch up. And one of the people there worked with Roughriders years ago. And was always on the sideline and was always I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. A young sports nut, a football fan. And so I was teasing him. I was giving him some drinks, and I'm like, CB, you got to get me a job there someday. I'll do anything. I'll do laundry. I'll run out and get the kicking tee off after a kickoff. Whatever you need, I will do. I'll do stats. I'm doing it. And that's what I was at the university at the time in Bachelor of Science, Mathematics, Statistics. And so that's where it all started. And so he says, yeah, I'll see what I can do. Didn't think anything of it. About 3 months later, I get a phone call out of the blue. And this gentleman introduces himself. He says, my name's Jim Sturr. And I hear you're looking to potentially help out with the stats crew. And I'm like, pardon? He says, well, I got your name from CB Wilson. And CB recommended that I talk to you. And coincidentally, we just had someone who left our crew. They moved out to Kelowna, a retired teacher. So I need someone. He's like, I'd like to interview you. So we met for coffee at Stone's Throw by the university.
Oh, damn.
And a half-hour interview turned into 2 hours of us talking about football and just this passion we have. And again, talk about the small town feel. His brother went to school with my sister, and then the network that we have, we found so much overlap. And it was just so natural. And then he ended the meeting with a very interesting request. He goes, do you have a typewriter? I'm like, pardon? Yeah, I have a computer at home. I can type. He says, well, no, you need to get a typewriter because that's what you need to haul up to the press box. This was back in 1996. That's how you're going to do the play-by-play. There was no computer systems. It was all handwritten, and they thought it was advanced to use even a typewriter. And so then after every quarter, they'd rip it out of the typewriter in all dramatic fashion, run it to the photocopier, and that's what they'd hand out to media, and that's what they'd start faxing down to the CFL in Toronto. And so that's how it all started. And so I was doing that, every home game, doing stats, and when there was an injury, sitting there with whiteout, and, literally whiting out, the typewriter mistakes and the typos. And it was just, I got paid to watch a sport and a team I love. You couldn't ask for anything better. And call it what it is. That team was terrible back then. It was a terrible, there were some terrible teams that doing stats and some horrible records, but it didn't matter. I thought I was just at the top of the world. It was the greatest thing ever. And at the same time, so then I graduate university, And, then started the workforce, started at Connexus Credit Union and was working in their finance department, but from a stats and analytics perspective as a data geek. So I was doing, and coding back then, like there were no drop and drag reports, crystal reports. I don't think was even there yet. It was all like, you were coding everything. And well, when you're an analytics guy, it comes very natural. So it was so easy for me to pick up, and that's how it started. And then shortly after that, it was also what they called the brain drain back then. And it was a time where the biggest export from Saskatchewan was Canadian talent, was local, strong talent. There were so many resources that were not only going to Alberta, which has always been a trend for many years, which has gladly now shifted back, in our favor. But so many people in Canada were going down to the U.S. because the U.S., and it was pre-Y2K, the world was going to end when all their computers died with 2-digit dates. And that's what got me into deep into IT. So I moved over to the Ministry of Health. I moved over to government, and that's what I was doing. I was doing 2-digit mainframe programming on COBOL to fix the 2-digit date problem. And so, and then okay, we survived the year 2000. The world didn't end, and then it was okay. But there was, because I'm a data guy, was doing a whole bunch of stats analysis and utilization studies of healthcare services around the province. Then you start learning the sector. And what was interesting is I was kind of an anomaly where I understood the data and could do some really cool analysis, but I could also explain it. And I could sit down and explain it to health executives as well as clinicians. So then I was getting pulled into other areas. So I was actually sitting down during negotiations and all these really cool meetings with the clinical communities. Well, if you know data and you know how to get it, well, then you probably know how to develop databases. If you know how to develop and code databases, you can definitely integrate to databases. And then if you can do that, you can probably do the troubleshooting support and help in so many other areas. Before I knew it, within 5-6 years, covered so many areas of IT. So now we're early 2000s. They started, well, what's next? Well, this whole idea of electronic health records. So a physician should be able to pull up David Belof and look at the screen and see all my lab results, my radiology reports, my allergies, and everything about me and my medical history. Well, that was brand new back then. Everything was paper. Even the x-rays, it was all looked like Star Trek, from the 1960s. It was very archaic. So it was very cool all of a sudden getting into that. And so moved on to the electronic health record team, was their integration architect. And after about a year of working with our team and a bunch of external consultants, they fired the external group and said, Dave, you're now the chief e-health architect. I'm 30 years old and I'm thinking I'm top of the world. But then I'm also thinking, oh crap, what do I do now? But then it was great because it was all about how do we set Dave and this amazing team up to succeed. So they brought in a new group that was not about selling software. And they mentored me essentially into what that role truly meant. So then we go through the biggest procurement in health history at the time, and we get a vendor to, okay, they've been awarded, we're going to build an electronic health record system. And then they're like, Dave, great job. Now kind of just wait for them to do it. I'm like, what? I can't go in there and roll up the sleeves and be a data geek and a programming geek and have a blast doing it. And they're like, no, that's not your role. You got to wait. So I'm like, well, I think it's time to look at something else then, because I'm not a sit still kind of person. At the same time, the group that was mentoring me, I called them and kind of give them the news of, hey, I've got I reached out to 3 different companies. All 3 have come back. They want to give me an offer. I need references. Will you be a reference? And they're like, absolutely not. I'm just devastated.
You will answer everything.
Yeah, well, just wait. And I'm like, and they're like, no, you misunderstand. We don't want you to go work for them. Just come work for us. I'm like, oh. So it went from, oh my God, uncomfortable. That 3 seconds of silence on the phone was the biggest gut punch ever. And then and they're like, come work for us. And by the way, we just won a cool project with the government of Nunavut, and you'd be perfect for it. You'd be the chief architect to develop the strategy in northern Canada. Now, not many people get to the Arctic and into the Northern Territories. So I'm sitting there thinking I'm young, I've got a young family at home, we've got our firstborn child already. I'm like, this is a big step, and I'm going to be away. And I'm like, how much time? I'm not going to go relocate and be away from my family for months on end. No. the client would be like, they're going to ship you full telehealth equipment, like video conferencing equipment. So it wasn't just a little webcam. Oh no, I had my own server. I had the video tracking camera, which you think back, like this is 15 years ago or more. Like that was actually 16 years ago. That was ridiculously expensive equipment, but then I could do the work from home. So I'd go up maybe every 6 weeks, spend a week, and then I'd be 6 weeks at home. So then I'm like, okay, this would work. So I said yes. And it was scary because I was government, I had 10 years in, and like I had great benefits. I worked with amazing people. The hardest thing was leaving the people. And the assistant deputy minister at the time, you know, he was my mentor. He was, and for me to leave, it was leave him and almost his guidance. It was hard. And so then I left, and it was, and I thought I was so smart. I was a chief e-health architect and I know everything. And all of a sudden there was that aha moment of, I'm learning about like sunspots and intermittent technology, like of communications, on how radiation can from sunspots can affect satellite communications and internet usage and everything in northern Canada. And I realized, oh my goodness, do I have a lot to learn? Because I was in a little box, and all of a sudden I got pushed out of that box, and you're looking around and it's like, oh my God, now what? And so, you know, just going through that experience and learning what I did, going up and experiencing a culture that I've just read about. They're beautiful people. I always tell everyone in Canada, if you get a chance to go to the Northern Territories, go to Iqaluit, go to Yellowknife, go to Whitehorse. It is an unbelievable experience if you get to truly get to experience what the culture's like. And you know, there's lots of cool things that happen. So I worked with this small boutique firm with JRS Partners and an incredible group for about 3.5 years. But the travel was still tough. So now, and I'll never forget, I had a little Skype camera, I had a little camera on a big TV in the basement. It was similar to this room, actually. I had a big TV and a Skype camera in my computer. And I knew it was time to rethink when my wife was in the basement and with my firstborn. My wife's pregnant, and all of a sudden, I can't see my daughter anymore while we're video conferencing. And my wife is like, oh. And I'm like, well, what's she doing? Well, she's giving you a kiss on the TV screen. And all of a sudden, like the lip starts quivering, the eyes are tearing up. And it's like, it's hard to be away from your family like that. So then at the same time, I get a call from a recruiter who's working with a firm in Regina. They said, Dave, they're looking for someone exactly like you. I'm like, well, who's looking for me? And it was one of my competitors. It was KPMG. And I'm like, well, why would an accounting firm want to talk to me? I'm not an accountant. I know I work corporate finance for a stretch, but I was a data guy. No. They're more than that. They have this big advisory service, and they're in the tech. And I met with them, and I'm like, oh, wow. So they're like, how would you like to do what you do, but not travel anymore? My wife pretty much grabbed that offer and signed it, and then it was in. And so that's when I left. And so then I was with KPMG for about 5.5 years. And loved my time there. Worked with some amazing people, and all of a sudden got my first glimpse into what a global firm is like. So I got to work on projects as this young 30-something-year-old, and like thinking, okay, like there's so much in these areas that I don't know about, but I didn't have to try to be the smartest person in the room. I got to work with some amazing people that would come in, and you got to learn and observe and so on. And did that, loved my time there. And then all of a sudden they found out all my e-health background. Next thing you know, I was on a plane to Ireland, and because I was doing all these really cool projects and bringing global leaders in, and got to know them and worked great with them, and obviously built a good brand with them. And they're like, Dave, we need you to talk to these clients in Ireland. So I get on a phone call and I'm talking away, and they're like, great, you're perfect. I'm like, great, you're perfect. Like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I just thought this was like an information session. They're like, no, you're not understanding. I need you here in 3 weeks. Like, pardon? No, like 3 weeks. Like, so then boom, I was on a plane. I'm going to Dublin. I've never gone that far away from home. And now you're not going for like 5 days. You're now going for like 3-4 weeks. So all of a sudden now I'm kind of, I'm going back to what was happening before. But again, it was one of those opportunities that, like, it's a grandkid moment. Like, going up to the Arctic was something I knew I'd get stories that I'd be able to tell my grandkids someday. going to Dublin and working with the government of Ireland is something I'll be able to tell my grandkids someday. And it's just great life experience. So I did that. And then at the same time, Deloitte was calling. And I'm like, why are you bugging me? And I'm like, sorry, my phone here. I'll just turn it silent. And they're like, well, we'd like to talk to you. So finally they broke me down and I went and talked to them. And then I found out the firms are different. And all of a sudden, like for what I do, I'm a big tech guy. I'm a geek. And the things that I was looking to build from scratch or just that was in its infancy, they had established. And it was all of a sudden, it's like, where is Dave a better fit? And it's not about which one firm is different or better. It was just, where would Dave be more successful? And so, after a huge amount of thinking about this, made the tough choice and did the literal and metaphorical walk across the street to Deloitte. And it's one that, for me, like I always thought about what success would look like. And I was thinking, geez, if I cause I was building a practice from scratch. I had 2 people in the province and some people were flying in, but this is a market that's all relationships. And so when I made the move and went over, it was, okay, if I can get to 10 to 15 people, wouldn't that be great? Okay, if I get to X amount of revenue, wouldn't that be amazing? And that's what success was in Deloitte's eyes. And I'll never forget, they asked me a question when we were going through this whole vetting process. I'm not even going to call it interview process. It's almost like dating. Like, do you want to spend a lot of time with this person? And it's on both sides. Because, it's not just are they going to offer me a job? Are these the leaders that I want to work with? Are these the leaders that I want to grow into? Are they doing things that I've dreamt about? And the answer, like, they checked all the boxes. And to me, it was, oh my God, wouldn't that be a great experience? So then, they offered me the job. I came over. But I knew when you go from one competitor to another, it's always tough. And I will say the managing partner at KPMG at the time, Mark Lang, was just the most amazing person. Then I'm glad that it was, just the discussions with him, like he understood. And he's like, Dave, this breaks my heart, but I understand. And, when you shake hands and you give a hug, you leave on great terms. And those are the type of people that, like Mark was the type of person that I was going to miss. So I made the move. In parallel, over this entire journey, every home game, I'm in Regina at the old Taylor Field and the new Mosaic Stadium, and working through and doing stats. And I missed 2 or 3 home games in 26 years. And so it was quite a great experience. And, and it was always kind of that stable thing. And, we're talking even this morning, like mom and dad had a beach cottage at Last Mountain Lake at Sunset Cove. And, every weekend game in the summertime, there's Dave having a quick shower and cleaning up at 2:00 in the afternoon to drive into town and get the computers set up and get everything and get everything going. And even when we did the migration from typewriters, and like Bob Young, the person who started Red Hat many years ago, bought the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's this new stat system in place. Broke my heart because me and another guy from Connexus Credit Union were going to build a system, and we're about a third of the way in, and all of a sudden, well, that got thrown out the window because they went and implemented a new one. But at that point, that's when this crew of, retired, a really cool mix of retired teachers and just in this group, they're like, well, Dave, we don't know computers. Computers terrify the crap out of us. This is your crew now. Good luck. Wish you all the best. And and we'll come help you whatever you need. So then I got a group of really strong tech people. I got like a really strong infrastructure guy. I got a Microsoft architect. I got another data guy, and that we're buddies. And I'm like, okay, this is a group that we want to be with and want to spend more time together. This would be a perfect group in case something goes wrong. So that's how I built that crew. And that group worked together we kept that group together for probably 10, 12, 13 years. And then, and my one guy, my successor, so Matt Spence took over, who's also at your current employer. I should introduce you to him. You should meet. And then he took over the crew when I left about a year, I guess 2 years ago. And yeah, it was not only, hey, this is a good group that loves the game, but we love being together. And if shit goes sideways, we'll figure it out together. And so yeah, we were probably one of the strongest stats crews in Canada. And then with with the system evolutions, everything else, then we got to a point where we would have a crew in-house at every stadium, but then we'd have an audit crew behind the scenes that would watch the game. Everyone had a PVR, and we'd watch the games in about a 15-second delay and audit the plays that were entered by the in-stadium crew. And then so within a minute, we'd have everything finalized after every play. So every play was up to date. And at the end, there was always a little bit of reconciliation that we had a centralized group do. But it was a very cool process to be able to do that at the lake, sitting at the cottage, getting paid to watch football. It really was like a sports kid's dream come true. And so, yeah, it was 26 years. And then the other really cool part to it is then all of a sudden they're like, hey, Dave, we're trying to figure out a crew for like the Touchdown Atlantic games. Any chance that you could be there? And all of a sudden I look at my schedule and it was one of those, the world was telling me where I needed to be. And I'm like, well, you know what? Coincidentally, I'm in Halifax that week. So if you're okay, you don't have to pay for my airfare because it's already paid for. If you're okay paying for a hotel for a couple nights, I'll stay. Great, done. So then I was working in Atlanta. I worked one of the Touchdown Atlantic games. I worked probably, I think anywhere between 5 and 10 different Grey Cups, whether in Toronto or Ottawa or the ones at Mosaic Stadium. And yeah, it really was. And just from the people I met and I had a 26-year internship in a professional sports league is how I put it. Because I also got to go to a bunch of the CFL conferences. And as far as they were concerned, there was this young stats guy. What they weren't thinking about, well, here's a tech and business and transformation leader that is walking and listening to everything we do as well. So, when it comes to, different fields, whether it's electronic health records or professional sports or other areas and the things that I got involved in, like that was the coolest life experience and learning experience because I know everything about that league. And from their financial models to, a lot of their staffing decisions, a lot of the challenges they're facing and everything. So, when you have those discussions, all of a sudden they're like, well, how do you know all that? Well, because I sat in the corner listening for 26 years. So yeah, it's like, so the CFL, while it's been, I'll call it the greatest side hobby of my life, has been one of the coolest moments. And just thinking of, if when you're at a CFL conference and you're standing in line and there's John Hufnagel, like getting food at lunch. I'm with Joe Powell. I'm with John Hufnagel. There's Louis Pasaglia, like all these icons from Canadian sports. And I'm surrounded by like a lot of my idols. So I was starstruck and it was just the coolest experience ever. So yeah, that's kind of the side story. And so I've been at Deloitte now for 8.5, almost 9 years. And the only reason I gave up doing stats, and also made it a family affair. Like my niece was helping at times where she was doing, because we always had paper manual in case the internet ever went boom or anything like that. If there was something that ever, we wanted to have the paper backup in addition to a computer backup. Like we had actually 3 levels depending on different scenarios. So we never lost anything. And so my niece helped. My wife was with our stats crew for probably 10 to 15 years as well. She knows defense so well. It's hilarious. We'll be watching a game and we'll be with a group of friends now. And all of a sudden my wife will make a comment about the strong side linebacker. And all of a sudden they just kind of look. That's not what they expected to hear. But I mean, and that's, or so-and-so, great tackle. Actually, no, it was that other person because they were the ones who hit him first. And yeah, so she was our defensive spotter for like probably 10, 15 years. And so it really was, my oldest daughter was in the press box quite a bit as well. So, to just get my family through there. My youngest came in once, that wasn't her cup of tea. It wasn't what she wanted to do, but my dad even came in and spotted a few times as well, which was great. And just to be my father-in-law as well. So to have, those memories and that experience, I mean, it's not something that's very common. It really was a unique experience. I had no idea how special it was when I said yes and what the impact would be. But just from the people I met and the experiences I had and everything, and to do that, not as my career, but my hobby on the side, and to still learn everything else from, like, I got to travel all of Canada, from Atlantic provinces. I always say from coast to coast to coast, from the Atlantic provinces to northern Canada to BC. I got to experience that. I got to travel to the Middle East. I got to work in Europe. I worked all over North America in my 20 whatever years that I've been working. I guess 26 years. Now I'm feeling old. But, it really was just a blessing. And to be able to do that always from Regina as my home, I wouldn't want it any other way. So that's kind of my story.
That's actually insane. Like, like I've never actually met a person with so much background and so much experience. And that's in, like, I think you mentioned about 7 different fields.
It's it's been crazy. And part of, like, and everybody's different of what makes them, that gets them excited. And one of the things I always talk to my teams about, your strengths aren't necessarily what you're good at. Your strengths are what you're passionate about. And I'm about continuous learning. Like, I love learning new things. I can't remember if we talked about this, last month when we were chatting, but, if I want to learn something, kind of a little obsessive about it. Like, I wanted to learn about barbecuing, right? So I'm on YouTube, I'm buying books, and I'm trying to, like, smoke the perfect pork butt or the brisket, and I'm not doing it to the quality. Like, and I grew up in a family that loves to cook. My mom's an amazing cook. My dad was a great cook. So much was always about, family dinners and and big supper parties with close friends and that, because so much was based around food. So I'm like, I need to learn this. And it wasn't, and then all of a sudden a buddy of mine's like, yeah, hey, I'm like, what are you doing next month? Like, we should get together. He's like, well, I've got this barbecue competition. I'm like, whoa. You got what? He's like, yeah, I'm helping out with the professional barbecue team. I'm like, get me in. He's like, what? I'm like, Perry, like, I'm trying to learn. I'm not doing as well. So I went to a professional barbecue competition as one of their, like, sous chefs, just to learn. So to work with all of a sudden a professional barbecue team, and then it's a cool community, and then I was taking barbecue classes, like Rob Reinhart. He's a world-class barbecue guy. He runs classes all over Western Canada, and was taking classes from him and did this. And all of a sudden the light bulb moment went off. This is what I need to do to be better. And it's almost, that's happened in so many areas. And I look at all the work, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in, I'll call it just in public sector within governments, whether municipal governments or provincial governments, or even from a federal level perspective, working with, higher education and universities and polytechs and regional colleges and technical institutes. That's it's been the recipe for me of, learn from the best. Work with the top chefs in their fields, and be able to do that. And so, like, to say that, like, I always say I've had the most blessed adventure possible. And it's not to say that it hasn't been hard. Like, I've had moments of questioning and, like, why am I doing this? I'm ready to quit. I want to do something completely different. And there's always been moments of, how do you pull back and take a look and find out what are the factors that you're responsible for? Because as human beings, we hate to admit when we're wrong. It's part of our culture a little bit growing up is, it's always, parents scolding you, and you're looking at them, you're trying to figure out how to get out of getting in trouble instead of owning it necessarily. And, mom and dad always, they were, I'm not going to say, they weren't overly strict, but they were, responsible parents. And they said, look, if you lie to us, we're going to come down with hell's fury on you. But if you're upfront and you own it, it'll be a very different conversation. And it's hard to come to that. And there was at one point I worked with one firm and sat down with the boss, and I'm like, this last month killed me. I proved you can work a 100-hour work week, and I did that 4 weeks in a row, 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And you do the math of how you work 100 hours in 7 days for 20 plus days straight. I think it was 23 or 24 days in a row. Like, and you start thinking of how does that work in our time schedule? You're waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You're at work by 4:30. Or actually, I think I was actually at work by 4 because I was trying to get 4 hours in before the rest of the team would come in. And you get 4 hours of work in. Well, that actually was, it felt like 8 because no one's bothering you. So you could just 4 hours of pure 100% focus time. Then you'd work the 8-hour day. Then I'd stay a few hours later. And then I'd come home. I'd force feed myself because I'm exhausted. I'm stressed. And then I'd go to bed and I'd repeat 7 days straight, multiple weeks straight. So it was like 23, 24 days. And I'm like, I don't want to be a consultant anymore. I don't want to be in this field. And the boss, he says, you know what? I totally get it. But your next job, no matter what you do, and you'll be great at it, Dave, you're going to get a situation like this again. What are you going to do different instead of trying to work the 100-hour work weeks? So is it the industry or the role you're in, or is it really how you positioned yourself up, and did you have winning conditions around you to do it? And you could say, yeah, absolutely. There were people that abandoned me in the firm and left me on my own, but there were also others that didn't. I had two more junior people that worked with me that are now amazing leaders in the field as well, in their fields as well. They didn't abandon me, and we plugged through. And they'd come to work. They were still coming. I didn't ask them to work super long hours. They were still coming in at 7 a.m. And they'd come in and they'd see me work, and they're like, "How long have you been here?" Yeah, I just pounded out like 30 pages, and I've been here for like 3 hours. And they're like, "Oh my God." And we did it together. And then all of a sudden you take a step back, and what could I have done different? If people abandoned you, did you call them out on it? Did you ask for others to step in and help you? Because inherently in our Canadian culture, and in so many cultures around the world, when you ask for help, people come. Like, I think that's truly one of the most beautiful things is that we can do as people, is when somebody needs help, you drop what you're doing and you help them. Yeah. So what am I going to do different when I get in that situation next? Is it the role of a consultant, or is it how you set yourself up? Because that could be in sales, that could be in anything that you do. You're always going to have those challenges. So what are you going to do different? So that was just one of those big life aha moments for me.
And I feel like asking for help doesn't show that you're weak. It just shows that you have the courage.
Yeah.
I was watching this animated movie. It's called I don't know if you've seen it, The Lion, the Fox, and the Boy. It's like a new movie on Apple TV.
Yeah. It's on my list.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's an amazing movie.
Okay.
And the horse, he asked the kid that, what's the bravest thing you've ever said? He says, help.
Yeah. We one of the things that culturally at Deloitte, and what, I absolutely love to embrace, and why I'll call it drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, I know I'm in the firm where I am where I need to be, is we tell our teams and everybody from new hires to senior leaders, if something's going wrong, ask for help. It's a sign not only of courage, which absolutely it is. It's a courage. It's a sign of strength, and it shows maturity. Because if you try to do it, sometimes, we get I'm going to solve it myself. I'm going to show everyone how great I am. And I understand that. We've all been there, especially in sports. Like growing up, like I grew up in a very, sports-driven environment. My parents saw it at an early age. I'm a kid with a whole lot of energy, and if we don't keep him busy, he's going to get into a lot of trouble. And so, if you have a problem, you figure it out on the field, and if you're getting in your own head, you got to clear it. You go. That was part of the mentality back then. And so, like, if you get in a hole, you dig yourself out. Like, no, you can't expect everyone to do everything for you. And I get that. There's times where, like, we have to take a step back. And, we're seeing, more problems and more challenges in the younger generation that's coming up, and more areas of disrespect and everything. It's one thing when we talk about, how do we coddle our kids versus how do we say, no, you figure it out to a point, but I will be there when you truly need me, but you got to give it your best effort first. Right? So it's not that I'm contradicting and saying, no, but there's a time where if you've taken a look, you're struggling, and you're like, I don't know how to get out of this. Great. Ask for help. It's the best thing you can ever do. And the fact is, you know, the more people that'll come, you know, like so many will come, but more importantly, you will learn so much more than if you did tough it out, work the 100-hour work weeks and get out of it yourself. And most 99% of the time they probably would. But do you really want to take 10 years off your life doing it? You know, it's not worth it. But you also have to realize, we you know, one of the things that we do need to focus on, and I challenge my daughters with it all the time, is don't ask for help too quick. And if you are asking for help, or you're having challenges with something, research the question and know exactly what you're asking. And I learned that at health years ago. I remember asking, there was one lady I worked with that people were scared to talk to. She was so smart. But if you didn't know what you were asking, she'd chew you up and spit you out. And you know what? And I love that about her. And I'd laugh at people, you know, sort of thing, as the immature young, you know, just new in the workforce. And then one day I went over, I'm like, hey, I can't figure this out. She's like, well, what are you trying to solve? Well, and I did, and I couldn't, if I can't shape the what I'm trying to solve in 10, 20 seconds. And she's like, out. Come back when you know what you're asking for. And that's when people get scared. I'm like, oh. So I go back and I'm kind of moping. And I get to my desk. Like, you have two choices. You could sit and mope all day, or you could figure out what exactly you're trying to do and get the answer. So I'm like, okay. So I dig into it, write it all out, go back. This is what I'm looking for. She's like, great. This is how you do it. Her and I were close friends from that point moving on, because she challenged me to be better and to come at a standard that was at a professional standard. And that's what we did.
I'm going to track back a little here.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you more about your experience in the Northern Territories and the things that you learn. Like, you mentioned some awesome stuff like sunspots, radiation. You mentioned Yellowknife. Have you been to Yellowknife?
Yeah, I worked with the government of Northwest Territories as well.
Are you part of the sore thumb community?
No, I'm not.
No.
No.
Okay. I want to try it too.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, it's the very first day I went was January 16th, 2008. And I know that date because I'll never forget what the client said. She's waiting in the airport. You got these 3 people from Southern Canada that are flying up. We land, and it's not this huge airport. It's a small airport. It's painted yellow so they can see it easier. The pilots can see it during snowstorms and bad weather. We get off the plane outside. We walk from down off the runway into the small terminal, and the client's laughing. She is just a boisterous personality, just a beautiful person, and just lovely. Like, I just loved her laugh, everything. She's like, and she called us all by name. You're Dave, you're Jose, and you're Robert, and we've never met in person before. And we're thinking, did she memorize our proposal and our pictures? And so I said, how do you know who everyone is? She's like, oh, this is easy. Jose's from Toronto, and he's wearing $400 dress shoes. And Robert is from Quebec, and said, and I can't remember what she said about Robert. And she looks, and you must be from Saskatchewan, because you're the only guy who got off the plane that wasn't terrified by the cold, because it was like minus 43 with wind chill. But when I left Regina, it was minus 43 with wind chill here. So it was just like, oh my God. So we just laughed about that. So yeah, go up in January 2008. And, it was interesting because, number one, you don't show up in a suit. Yeah. You show up dressed like this. And because, think of from a cultural perspective. I mean, it's an Inuit community, and, they do not want to get the perception of, the Southerners with suits telling them how things are done. And so we went through a lot of cultural lessons and just understanding with respect to, what is respectful, what could be viewed as disrespectful, what would be, what are some of the cultural things that we need to be aware of. And we spent a couple days going through that. And even just something as simple as talking to an elder and them nodding at you, that has nothing to do, they're not agreeing with you, they're just listening to you. And as well, we're a very boisterous culture in Southern Canada, and especially Saskatchewan, where we love to be loud and to laugh at everything. as do, all cultures. But you never interrupt an elder. It's understanding what respect means. And the fact was just, it's such a beautiful culture. And, just learning about the importance of family, the importance of community, the importance of taking care of everyone, the importance of being resilient. I mean, to say they're in a tough climate is an understatement. And just, how they try to absolutely support everybody and live off the land, and how they respect the land and everything about. I'm in Iqaluit on Baffin Island. We're above the frost line. There's no trees. It's in the wintertime. There's not even shrubs. It is Arctic tundra. And there's no roads even beyond. I remember going for a run in the morning, and all of a sudden I find the sign. It says the road to nowhere. And the road goes out for another 20 yards and it stops, and it's just rock. And I'm like, oh, because it really was the road to nowhere, because you can't just go and start. There is no money to plow, to bulldoze and jackhammer roads in rock. And just so how they navigate the tundra and the climate up there. But even just some of the other things. I remember there was one week where we're there, and we're with a client group, we're running workshops, and we're all having lunch at the Frobisher Inn. And the food, I will say, in Iqaluit was some of the greatest food I've had, because you get the northern Quebec and French influence with traditional foods, from the muskox stew to the caribou to the Arctic char. And so we're just eating these amazing lunches and suppers and everything. And the RCMP come in. And it's a small town. There's 6,000 people in Iqaluit. And all of a sudden the RCMP whispers something to the lady, and she's like, okay, everybody, we'll get your lunches packed. You're going to leave them. We're going for a walk. And that was his wife. And what happened was a polar bear wandered in to the school and was in the schoolyard. And what's sad about it is there's no, it's not this Hollywood view of someone with a tranquilizer coming and shooting the bear and then taking it on a helicopter somewhere safe. No, they had to shoot the bear because the bear wandered in, and it's dangerous. These are amazing, gigantic animals that are predators. And so, but what was really amazing about that is they transported, I don't know how, I didn't see them lift and drop the bear down, but they're huge. I can't imagine the weight. They got it to the town square. The elders were there when we came, and the school was all around, all the school kids. They did an elder ceremony, showing respect to the animal and thanking the animal and thanking the earth. And then they got their traditional blades out and they cleaned the animal there. And everybody from the town was there, and they had little bags. They distributed the meat to everyone in the community. And so by the time we watched this, the only thing left was the hide and the 2 femur bones. And maybe, a couple organs that they can, I don't know if they can distribute or not, but everything was used, and it went to the entire community. It fed the community. And it really was one of those surreal moments that who gets to experience that? And we're just sitting there oh my God, and just to be a part of that. So, it really was just fascinating. And then the tech alone, it's, I learned so much on the technology front, but, the tech is the easy part. Technology is technology. We can read up, we can, call experts and get the aha moment. Now you can go ask ChatGPT and then verify, everything that you just got. But, there's so much that it really was from an experience perspective. When I joked, at whatever, 30 years old, that this will be something I'll be able to tell my grandkids about, I didn't realize how insightful that was until now, being a parent of teenagers and everything like that. So that was my Northern Territory. I did, like I said, I was in Northwest Territories. The only thing I regret in Northwest Territories is on my last trip. Well, there was 2 things. In Northwest Territories, on my last trip, we had a dog sledding day that was booked. And it got canceled because it got too cold. And it was too cold for the dogs. I was willing to bundle up, but when they said, when we get to minus 40s, it's just way too cold to the dogs. It's not fair. And I'm like, okay, so that was the one thing. I didn't do dog sledding. The other thing is when I was in Iqaluit, I got to know, obviously the teams. I had one trip. There was another young guy that wasn't from there, but relocated to Canada, and he was working in Iqaluit, and he was an adventure guy. And I just did a trip with another buddy and a group that he works with, where we went north of Saskatoon and spent 3 days on the Saskatchewan River, and you'd go down with the current and you're paddling. And I can't remember, like it was probably about 100 kilometers we covered over 3 or 4 days. And then you camp at night. We had two guys that were actually chefs, and they cooked in campfire stoves and everything. So we just did that trip, and now I'm in the north. And then we had this trip planned where we had a charter plane booked. We were going to go up more north off Baffin Island and go more to the mainland and do 3 days of sea kayaking. And we had a guide there and everything. And then 3 weeks before that was we were supposed to go, and I'm so excited. I'm telling everyone. And then all of a sudden, that my new buddy there, he quit his job and went somewhere else, and he left. And so then the trip fell apart. So that was my second regret. And then, so I think those are the two things that are still on my bucket list that I still want to do. So, and I will do it. And I'm actually talking to some partners in Calgary that are very adventurous as well. And we're starting to think about the next couple of years, how do we get a trip to Arctic Canada to do it? Because it really is, it truly is breathtaking and beautiful country. I mean, no different. I mean, people even don't realize how beautiful northern Saskatchewan is. And what northern Saskatchewan truly means. I mean, like really, we inhabit like the bottom third of our province. How many people actually take the time to go further north and actually experience, what even within our own province has? Like, it truly is remarkable.
Me and Pranav, we've been planning this trip to Yukon for like 6 months now, and we'll probably do it next year. Yeah. But like, I looked up at Yukon online, and it's just so beautiful. And the best part is, like, everybody goes to Calgary, to Banff, but like, it's so explored that it's not beautiful anymore. Yukon is so unexplored that it's just amazing.
There is that surreal feeling when you are out somewhere. Like there was one night, me and another guy that I was working with in Iqaluit. We get out. There's this little movie theater at the Frobisher Inn at this hotel on Iqaluit, which used to be called Frobisher Bay. And so they had this little movie theater. I can't even remember what we saw. And we go outside after the movie, and it's 11:30 at night, and we're squinting at the sun. And it was so bright out. It is like, oh my God. So then we hike up to the top and we take pictures, because who's going to believe us with the timestamp and everything? It's 11:30 at night. This is what 24-hour sunlight's like. So it is. There's so many things that and then when you're standing there and you're looking out and it's just quiet. And you get that surreal moment, and you're not in the big tourist area surrounded by, thousands of other people. And don't get me wrong, like that Banff and that whole area, in Alberta and interior BC, I mean, right through to Whistler. I mean, just Western Canada. It is so beautiful. Like, it really is something. But when you can be in an area and you feel like, oh my God, like you're completely by yourself. There is almost that, it's kind of double-edged. Part of it feels like quite a spiritual experience. And then the other is, if something goes wrong, who's gonna help me? There's almost this. So it really, in part like, yeah, I really want to go to Arctic Canada. I'm not going to do that myself. I'm not going to be one of those adventurers that just goes canoeing or kayaking down a river and goes thousands of miles by myself, because if all of a sudden I got a bear chasing me, I don't have anybody to outrun to get away from that, jokingly. But, it's just like, what if something did go wrong? So, but yeah, I mean, it's, and I think even, even in this province alone, what I don't understand is why Saskatchewan gets such a bad rap. Do we have terrible winters, cold winters? Absolutely. No one's denying that. But we have so much in this province, to see, explore. And I've maybe only done maybe 1% or 2% of it. And I've got so many things that I want to go check out. Yeah, I've traveled around this province a lot, but there's so much more that we have to go check out. And I love that you see all the social media, whether the Saskatchewan Wanderer or all these other things, but yet from an immigration perspective of the perspectives, whether in Europe or the Middle East or wherever we're talking, Asia, there's not always that enthusiasm or understanding of what Saskatchewan truly has to offer, because we're so different. You know, we're 1.2 million people, but look at the geography size that we have. And in Europe, there's almost this incomprehension of, well, there's a reason there's not many people there. Really? Well, because of the cold. Let's call it what it is. People don't really necessarily want to experience that. But you look at how beautiful our summers are. You look at the cost of living. You look at the lifestyle. You look at the values that small town feel has. And, you know, we talked about this a lot. Like, we try to keep our small town values. They don't say that as a derogatory term. Yeah, we're in the Queen City. We're in the capital. Same and then I look at Saskatoon. But I call them small towns for a reason, in the best way possible. Because we grew up with a value system that is truly based on small towns, of how you support your community, how you value your community. Take a look at some of the stats in Canada. Saskatchewan has the highest giving per capita to community groups in the country. And we're not the wealthiest province, but we give the most financially to support community groups. And, you know, just to know that, you know, this is the value system that we've grown up on, it's fantastic. You know, and you see examples all the time. You see somebody's car stuck. You see people pull over, and next thing you know, there's 4 strangers that are pushing a bumper to get someone out of the snow. You know, is that something I think we're losing these days? Yeah, I do. I think people are forgetting those. And I think we've all got a responsibility to just lead by example and to demonstrate that. And, you know, there's so much opportunity to just focus on all the amazing things. So when you think about, you know, whether you're going to Jasper or Banff or to Yellowknife, there are these amazing pockets to learn from. And Yellowknife, I call Yellowknife reminded me of Weyburn. You know, you've got your Tim Hortons, you've got your Boston Pizza, you got, you know, all like the core chains. And it had that feel. It had that small town feel. It had, like, you could sit down at a restaurant or at a bar and actually meet some friends there, like some new people there. And I loved it. I loved Yellowknife. I loved Iqaluit. I loved all my kind of adventures all over. And I think that's why I liked Ireland so much, because Ireland is absolutely a country that is culturally very much aligned to the Maritimes and Saskatchewan. I think culturally, just the way that they engage each other, and, you know, just I think their core values are very similar. I call Dublin my favorite Canadian city, because you walk up and somebody opens a door for you out of nowhere, and you don't necessarily get that in all big cities and everything. So
Lots of beer.
the Guinness is different. I can't explain it, but we were just talking about this. There's a senior partner at Deloitte. She's retiring this month, and her and her husband are leaving next week to Dublin. And we sat and talked about the Guinness factory and how they have to go and how amazing the beer is there. Yeah.
You know, your story and like your experiences about like culture, the art of giving back, especially from like Saskatchewan, reminds me of like the story that we talked about last time. And I absolutely love that, because that's just how stuff should be. Like, I remember you telling us about like your hometown, that if there were like a hurricane or like a bad storm and somebody's deck was blown off, every single person in that neighborhood would come up to that house and try to fix it for them. And I absolutely love that, because you're right, you don't see that nowadays too much. So how would you try to bring that back as like a one person making a step forward?
Well, I think you guys are doing it. I think you guys are showing exactly how we need to do this. Like, we need to talk about it. We need to show who we want to emanate in our communities. And we talked about this quite a bit. Like, yeah, I grew up at Sunset Cove, a nice little, you know, community out at the lake. And, you know, growing up there, like my birthday's in the middle of summer. And when I was born, Mom and Dad took me straight from the hospital straight to the lake. And that was the community I grew up in. And we had that place for 50 years. And, you know, I'll never forget when I had a wedding shower. Like, the community threw a wedding shower for us.
Oh, wow.
Out there. And, like, all the people came over. And I remember telling them, and I meant it, and I still think about it to this day. When you grow up in a city like Regina, I knew my neighbors, but I didn't break bread with my neighbors a lot. At the lake, there's something going on every weekend. Like your parents are going, when I was 7 years old, I had a little cribbage board, like the card game, cribbage.
Yes.
And I would walk up and down the road and find some of the old guys out there and play cribbage with them. And that's how I learned to count. That's how I learned to play cards. And they didn't like that by the time I was 8, I was beating them. But it felt like what a community truly means. Like if there was a big storm and, like you talked about, if docks got blown over, damage to a place, trees got blown down. If you saw someone who needed help, like everyone would get up, we'd have our coffee, we'd be sitting there going, oh shit, what just happened? Well, there's no sense in crying about it. Just get up and let's get going. And we get together as a group, and you'd start at one end and you'd start standing up the docks, and before you knew it, by noon, everyone was done. Now think about if everybody had to do it themselves. And I look at my household, I've got 2 teenage daughters and my wife, and for us, physically, could we have lifted those docks? Yeah, but it would have been hard. And all of a sudden you get like 6 or 8 adults going through and starting on one end and doing it at the other. We could do it in minutes compared to hours. And so, and it really is like, if we talk about where do we start? Number one, we got to just do it. We got to lead by example. And like, if there's a snowstorm in our bay, I love getting up at 6:30 in the morning, getting the snowblower and cleaning out my driveway, cleaning off the sidewalk. I've got a lady beside me, senior citizen. Her husband passed away. She's a widower. She is the sweetest person in the world. Of course I'm going to snowblow her driveway out for her. There was even one morning, it's like not even 7 o'clock yet, and she comes running outside in a sweater saying, thank you so much. And I'm like, Fran, thank you, but go inside and be warm. It's my pleasure. It's the least I can do, right? We should be supporting those in our communities. If you see someone at the side of the road, help them out. Push their car out of it, help them if their wheels are spinning or anything else. Help them push their car back out. And, I think the more we do that, hopefully, and I think the other thing, actually backing up, we need to make sure our kids are following that. Like, I'm sorry, like if all, like there's times where, I'll purposely kind of step back if I'm with my family, and I'll watch my daughters in what they do. And when I see them open a door for someone, or just do something nice, somebody drops something and they run over and pick it up and they go tap them on the shoulder. Excuse me, you dropped this. That's what we need to be showing and demonstrating. It's those little things. Even, there was, last month I was in Vancouver, and it was a beautiful morning. I'm walking to the office, and nobody talks to each other in a big city. You walk here, someone will say good morning to that. And all of a sudden this lady walking by says, good morning. That simple act raised my energy level. Like just saying good morning to someone. Like, where do we start? We start by telling these stories, and we actually lead in the communities and do it. One of the things Deloitte does very well is we do an impact day. We close up every office in Canada. We've got 16,000, 17,000 people now in Canada. And everybody is in their community that day. And we pick organizations, and whether it's like Habitat for Humanity and helping them build homes, or working at the Humane Society and helping them in the shelter, or whatever it is, let's go and be in the community. Like, and you think of, you start doing the math of 17,000 people and what the salaries are for that day. But that's the right thing to do. We encourage our people and our teams, regardless if you're a new hire or a senior partner, what are you doing to make an impact that matters? Right? Like, there's so many things that we could be doing. Are you volunteering to coach like your kids' sports team? And what are you teaching in that sports team? Are you teaching them how to be a good player and to be selfish and just worry about your skills? Or are you actually showing them and demonstrating how to be a good teammate, how to look after your own, how to actually support people that are down? Everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a bad game. People, sometimes you get to work and you're salty. We were giggling about that this week. Me and another partner showed up at the same day at the same time, and we were salty. And then all of a sudden we just giggled about it. Because it's like, how do you bring the best out of your colleagues? How do you bring the best out of your teammates? How do you bring the best out of your communities? How do we support community members that truly need help? And that's what we need to focus on. We demonstrated at a corporate level. We demonstrated at a personal level. And I think that's, like I love when I hear my community, when my team members come in. I had one of my young team members come into my office. We're talking about her career and what she's aspiring to and everything. But even before we got into that, she talked about how she just got back from Florida from coaching a cheerleading team and how well they did in their competition and how proud she was of these young cheerleaders. Not only as how they performed, but how they took care of each other. Those are the stories we want to hear. And those are the stories that need to be told.
It's hard to imagine you salty, to be honest. Look at that.
No, you know what? Hey, look, I mean, it's something like this. How can you not enjoy, talking about the good things in the world? But this was even a tough week. Like we were talking earlier. Like we had long hours this week, but work is energizing for me. Like I've got some young people that when they come in the office, I'm energized. Like I love seeing them. I love hearing how they're doing. I love hearing how their projects are going. And I just love being around them. So yes, work can be the happiest place in the world. But then sometimes you get tough projects or you have tough meetings or whatever else. But more importantly, you turn on the news and it's hard to watch. Like all of a sudden you look at downtown and there's spray paint with hatred on military memorials and epitaphs. And it's like, is that really a statement that's going to get somebody heard? Or is it just showing what's wrong in the world right now? Regardless of the messaging. And it was just hate. Like call it what it is. So is there any respect there? No. Even just looking at all you see what's happening, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or whether Israel, Palestine. You see the demonstrations at U.S. colleges and the violence, the destruction, and everything. Is that really getting a message across? Are you really making an impact? Or what about the one college that should be highlighted and praised for not going like screaming against each other, but instead getting around a table and breaking bread together as two groups coming together, with a group talking about the Jewish community in Israel and another group talking about the devastation in Palestine. Instead, they got together and they broke bread. That's what we want to see. We don't see that enough. So it's hard when you have a great week at work and then you see this devastation elsewhere and this negativity. Why don't we just focus on the good and learn from them? Because there's lots to be learned from so many different, whether it's college students, whether it's young people that are just, doing the right thing. There's so many areas where we could focus on and have just a better day and learn from that. And instead, what do we see? What do we see on YouTube? What do we see on TikTok? What do we see on Instagram and Facebook videos? We see craziness a lot of times. Hey, there's some great videos. Like, don't get me wrong. There's some things that make me giggle, but there's things that break my heart. Like I see what my teenage girls get exposed to, from body shaming to just hatred and negativity. And oh my goodness, it's just like if it was up to me as a tech geek who loves tech, I'd love to just throw it all away at times and just get people to can we just get around the table and talk about our day? There are no tables. We don't sit. If you're at the supper table, there's no TikTok. There's no, put your phone away. Let's just visit. Even if you had a tough day, tell us why you had a tough day. Even if you don't want to talk, just here's some of the other good things. That's what we need to focus on.
I feel like especially this whole idea of when you're at the dining table, no technology. I grew up in a hostel and we didn't have any technology, like no phones, no laptops. Our meals, so we had like a big dormitory and we lived with like 30 kids, 30 people in one dormitory. It was all about the community. When you're sitting at a meal, like my dining room, we had a special dining room and 10 people sitting together and we just talked about how our day went. And it's probably the best moment of my life. Like I remember every story that we talked about And it's just amazing because there's no break. Like you're looking at a TikTok, you're scrolling mindlessly. There's somebody sitting in front of you. Let's just talk. Let's just talk to each other.
It's interesting. Like there are days where like I've got supper meetings or I've got late and it's longer days and I get home and then all of a sudden I don't get the chance to have supper or people are just dispersed. I see my one child over there, she's got her phone and she's just eating away and my wife's over here and just, relaxing. My other daughter, might be in the basement or she's out. And I'm like, those are the nights that I'm like, it kind of takes the wind out of me. Because everything I do at the end of the day is, I want to make an impact. But I want it to be about my family. Like my legacy, there's work stuff, but it's work stuff. What I really want my legacy to be is what I taught my family and what my family grows into. That's what I want my legacy to be. And all these other things and it's been cool. I've had some cool stories and great experiences. But at the end of the day, I just want to be with my family. And, my kids always ask me when it's like a birthday coming up or Father's Day or Christmas, like, what do you want? I'm like, time. Without even hesitation, it's time. Like a watch? No, not a watch. No, I want time with you. I miss those experiences because they're older. They're more independent now. I miss the times of, going to your sports events and then stopping for a bubble tea or a coffee or a Slurpee or an ice cream cone and just sitting on a bench and giggling about what just happened. About, hey, did you see this, what I did this on the court or I did this at the musical and blah, blah, blah. I just want time. Like when we're at the lake, what do you want to do today? I want to go for a walk in the hills with my dogs and my girls. To me, that is like the ear, like the shoulders come out of the ears. You get that nice, that calmness, and it's just relaxing. And it fills the bucket, moments like that. And there are different things that fill the bucket. Like there was, I posted on social media around Easter time. I'm like, I had a fill the bucket day. I got up, I went for a hike in the hills with my dog because everyone was still sleeping. So I got up early and I got to stretch the legs and just get some fresh air. I ice fished with a buddy that I don't get to spend enough time with. He was ice fishing out there. And then I fired up the snowmobile. We had no snow this year. So that was the one day because we had that huge snowstorm right before Easter weekend. I snowmobiled out. I spent time with him. 3-4 hours. There was no electronics. We sat in an ice fishing shack and we reconnected. And we laughed for 4 hours straight. Then I went snowmobiling with my brother for a bit on the ice. And then I played cards with my family. And then it was supper time with family again. That's a fill your bucket day. That's probably about a fill your bucket week, really condensed into one day. But those are the things that kind of justify everything, all the longer hours and all the work trips and everything. So you do get experiences like that.
That's pretty amazing. I love that. And you see, there's no money, there's no materialistic things involved in that. It's because those things, at the end of the day, they don't actually matter. They're important to sustain life. You need money, but are you doing what you like?
It's interesting because we talk. You know what, you guys, you really triggered something when we were talking. And one of the things I was thinking about is, I was listening to an audiobook. I go back to Saskatoon, back and forth quite a bit. Now that we don't have that little charter flight, which I hear rumors we're going to have something soon, but between Regina and Saskatoon. So I've got that 2.5 hour drive. And I was listening to one audiobook, and I can't remember the author, but he talked about, why do we climb the mountain? Do we climb the mountain to be seen, or are we climbing the mountain out of desire? And is that what we're training for? And why are we doing it? And are we doing it for the wrong reasons? Are we trying to get to the top of the mountain to show everyone that I made it to the top of the mountain and look at all my glory? Or did we actually climb to the top of the mountain because that's what we've been training for our whole life? That's what we want to emanate to our team members, to our family members, to our communities, that we can do it. And what is our motivation for doing it? And when you start talking about the financial side and the monetization side, you look at YouTube and TikTok, and we talked a lot about this. You look at the highest grossing people on social media. Are they really doing this to make our communities better, or to give the lessons learned that are going to make our communities better? Or are they just doing it for the shock factor, regardless if it's positive or negative, and 99% of the time it's horrible and negative of what they're spewing on social media, and they're profiting from it. You look at people that are worth tens of millions of dollars and are called influencers, but yet everything they talk about, or a lot of the things they talk about, are negative. They're harmful to the way we look at ourselves. They make us feel bad because I'm not in physical shape as a 25-year-old. I don't go to the gym every day. I wish I had the time to. Yeah, and no, I've been following you on Instagram and seeing your daily challenges and everything. People are noticing, and it's awesome. But you're doing it to show that it can be done, and that to lead by example. Well, there's others that are doing it to say, look at how great I am, and if you're not doing what I'm doing, then you should feel bad about yourself. And they're doing it to sell their image, their brand, and then they get behind products and they're monetizing off those, and they're not necessarily doing it in the best way possible. They're not making our communities better. And to me, it's a head scratch of why is everyone buying into this? But I get it. I do. You watch it, and all of a sudden, if you go into it open and you're like, oh my God, like, from the music they play to their energy levels and everything, you do get pulled into it. You look at politics right now, and there's a lot of grandstanding. It's not me taking one side or the other. But, when, I think Bill Mayer did a great job of talking about, the further right you pull, the further the left will pull, or when the left pulls, then the right will pull even further. But what's the consequence of that? We keep pulling farther and farther apart. And when is the best of humanity? When does it come out? It's when we come together. And I'm not saying we should be centered, or we should be right, or we should be left. We should find a common ground and find the compromises that make our communities better. Like, it breaks my heart when you sit in the legislature, and there's a lot of great people that are doing some amazing things at the political level. And this isn't about one province or at what level. But when you sit and you hear the debates and you don't necessarily see the respect and again, it's how do we, I remember years ago, and I remember meeting some politicians, and there are politicians that do this. And I just wish there were more of them. That when there is something said by the opposition, that the head government would come and say, that was actually a great idea, and I want to give you props for that. But here's where I think we can actually shape that together and make an impact. And we see it at a federal level, we see it at municipal levels, we see it at all levels of how do we see city councils that come together and they argue for the sake of arguing instead of finding the common ground of what makes the most sense for the community, for the taxpayers, and strategically for the long term. And I think we've got leaders that are really showing it. And, I look at a lot at the leaders we have in this province, and I'm excited about the leaders we have at the municipal and provincial levels and so on. But I don't see outside of our province, I don't see that coming together. And I see that on international politics. I see that everywhere. And it's so, when going back kind of full circle of, how do we change it? We share our stories. We share the stories when politicians do come together and make the greater good. Why are we not highlighting that? Why does that story on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, why does that not have 1 million likes? And how do we highlight those leaders that truly make an impact? I think that's where we fall short a lot. You look at so many great things that are happening with Indigenous communities and Indigenous leaders and how they're making an impact. You see other corporations that are, I look at Deloitte, one of the first in Canada to build a reconciliation action plan. And we've got our second iteration of our reconciliation action plan. We're talking about how Deloitte is structured And Deloitte Canada has a CEO. We don't just have a CEO, we have a CEO that cares. And I know that sounds cheesy, but he actually brought his entire senior leadership team to Regina last week. And they spent not only time with all our senior leaders, the full C-suite. They didn't just spend time meeting with clients. They spent 2 days at First Nations University of Canada meeting with Indigenous leaders to get advice and guidance and educated on how we're doing on our reconciliation action plan and how we as corporate Canada can do better. Not many leaders take that time to do that and to spend the time, not just on Bay Street in Toronto, but to do that in a small city, in our small town, to get to the heart of where we need to be better. And to me, that's leadership. Like, these are leaders to emanate. And so I look at the senior leadership team that, people that I've worked for, there's one leader, we were joking last week. Her and I have worked together on and off for well over 15 years. And I couldn't be more proud of what she's accomplished in corporate Canada, but how she's done it. And like Georgina is one of those leaders that, again, who do we want to emanate? And can we be that, and what can we learn from them? From all those leaders on the SLT, AV, like our CEO. My goodness, like, so much to learn when I get time with AV, and he spends time with individual leaders and in individual markets. He's had more trips to Saskatchewan in his tenure, and I think he's probably 7-8 years at Deloitte, than every other CEO in Deloitte Canada, because he understands not only what Saskatchewan has to offer, but also what the importance of the Saskatchewan practice is and what we can learn from Saskatchewan across the firm. One of the jokes I always had when I first started, kind of being a young, naive new partner at Deloitte, so many years ago, is I always joked, I am going to get partners to know where Saskatchewan is globally. And a little naive in the comment, like, how are you going to make, like, this is, before a lot of the social media boom and everything else, like, I'm going to make sure everyone here in this global meeting knows where Saskatchewan is. Then I made the comments, then I'm thinking about it after, I'm like, what the hell did I just say? How am I going to do this? Other than by being annoying with emails, but how am I going to do this in the best way possible? And so fast forward about five years, and we win this huge deal in Saskatchewan. And I got an email from our global CEO. I didn't even realize he knew where Saskatchewan was. To get that email, which I still have saved and printed, by the way. I actually hard printed it in case I ever lost it. Just to say, Dave, I heard what you just did in Saskatchewan. Unbelievable. That's amazing. And not just in a smaller market, but to be one of the first in North America to do this. I just want to say congratulations and great work, and just how proud I am. To get that from a global CEO. We're now 468,000 people globally. And for him to take the time to be one of the 468,000, at the time we were a little bit less. I think we were maybe 350 to 400,000.
Which is still not less.
Which is a huge number, like, percentage-wise, is he took the time to reach out and do that. And he didn't need to. He just heard this news at a global meeting, like, hey, did you hear about Canada? He's like, where in Canada? And they couldn't pronounce it. Saskatchewan, like, who knows how they butchered it. And he took the time to email me and a couple other people just to say. So I emailed him back to say, you have no idea what this means. And he responded right away. Like, we were back and forth on email throughout the day. He took the time in his busy schedule to do that. Even this week, it was funny. I stopped in at my mom's house. And I shared with you that my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and thank you. It's it was tough, but it was also a blessing. Suffered from dementia, and just to see him trapped in his own mind, and just to know that he's at peace and in a better place. That's where I take solace. And in my own way, I talk to him almost every day, and that's kind of going off on a bit of a tangent, but. So I stopped in at Mom's because I usually call on the way home from work. Just, Mom, how was your day? And she lives like a 10-minute walk away from my house. I actually we moved in close to my old stomping ground. She's still in her original house and everything and just loves it. And all of a sudden she's having a dinner party. like 11 other people over there. She's cooking for 12 people. They're all playing bridge. They got the card tables going. And I'm like, I know every single person there. So I stopped in on the way home just to say hi. And just to see, like how, the positivity, the energy and everything. But it was so uplifting just to do that and make that trip back. But one of the funny stories that happened was, one of the ladies there, and she lost her husband about a year or two ago as well. She's like, hey, I meant to tell you, Dave, my grandson works at Deloitte. He's down in like, I think Denver or somewhere. And like, what's his name? This is what he tells me his name. I went home. I emailed him. He's this consultant. He looks like he's 15 years old. Because his global picture came up and everything. I emailed him and I said, hey, Hunter, I just wanted to tell you, my name's Dave Belof. I told him my role at Deloitte and, what I do. I just wanted to say, I was just with your grandma, and I've known your grandma for years, Grandma Pat. And she mentioned you're in Denver and, I hope everything's going well. And anyway, she says lots of beautiful, wonderful things about you. If you ever need anything at Deloitte, reach out to me anytime. And so he emailed me back the next morning. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Sends me a nice note back. And I thought that was it. I talked to Mom last night. And she's like, by the way, Dave, did you reach out to Pat's grandson? I'm like, yeah. He called Grandma that day so excited that some like bigwig at Deloitte. I'm like, which made me giggle. I'm like, some what? She's like, yeah, some big shot at Deloitte reached out to him to see how he's doing and to say, hey, I just saw your grandma. Simple gesture that just made that kid's day, right? Those are the types of things when we can do something as small as that. How long? That took me maybe a total of 3 minutes to search him online, like just on my phone in Deloitte Global address book. It's all with Outlook, so I just typed in his name and boop, popped up automatically. Typed a quick email, hit send. 3 minutes while sitting on the couch watching a hockey game. When we can do those little things, that's important, and that's what we don't do enough of.
And the best part is life is not that complicated. This little gesture that you did, like you said, it only took like 3 minutes. It's not that complicated or hard to be a nice person. It reminds me of like Nikhil and I follow Simon Sinek. Yeah. And we talked about this like last time as well. And that's his way of leadership. Like he explains there's two different types of leaders. One who comes into the employee's cubicle or like office and just bombards at him that, hey, your numbers are down, get them up or we can't guarantee a future for you here. And the other leader is he comes into the office and asks the employee, are you okay? Your numbers are down. Is everything all right? Instead of just demanding results, it's like a human connection. Like he's not your dog or your slave that you're just like barking orders at him. It's about like genuine connection that you make and see if you care or you don't. It's just as simple as that.
We've got one of the partners that brought me on was actually, he interviewed me in my, when they were looking at, during that dating interview cycle that I refer to, the speed dating, and his name's Van. And Van is now he's on our global leadership team. And just one of those people, great energy, amazing attitude, but I just connected with him. And one of the things he talked about, especially during COVID, is, how do we take care of our own people? How do we check in on our own teams? But more importantly, do we truly value our most important commodity? And it's our people. Like I said, we're 468,000 people. You don't grow to that size without having the right culture and the right brand and the right support system. It doesn't matter what your bottom line is. Don't get me wrong. We have to be fiscally responsible and keep growing as a firm. But we need to do it in a way that actually demonstrates that we do care. And how do we take care of our own? And I even look at our new culture people leader, Pascal, who's based in Montreal. We're on weekly calls now, with other culture people leaders, across the firm to just talk about, what do we need to do to keep the culture and to take care of our people, to show the leadership, to tell the stories that need to be told. How did we take care of each other? How did we take care of a client? How did a client reach out to us to show that we're making an impact, or to just be thankful, or to just be vulnerable and say, I'm having a problem and I don't know how to get through it. One group that that was presenting out in the Maritimes about a year and a half ago, the leaders talked about, they got a group of CEOs in a room, and presidents in a room, and they had a very real conversation of, where do you go when you're having struggles on mental health? Because it's difficult to go to your board, who are your bosses, who determine not only your financial situation, they determine how much you make, but they determine whether or not you have a job. Are you comfortable talking to them? Or where does the person at the top of the mountain go to when they're struggling? And it's a very real conversation and a real consideration of, where do leaders go talk to? Do you go talk to your younger staff, of sitting them down and being vulnerable to say, hey, here's where I'm struggling? A lot of leaders aren't comfortable doing that. They want to look strong. They want to look and put this persona there of strength, of power, of whatever else. But it's hard to show vulnerability. And there's also, at what point, there's also, is that appropriate? Like, of who you talk to. Like, there's so many things to consider. But we can't suffer in silence anymore. So who do people go talk to? There's so many people that I've talked to that, when they're struggling through things, they don't want to talk about it. They don't have the courage, like you said, to ask for help. And the suffer in silence, that's always a saying that always just resonates with me, of who do we talk to? And who do we feel confident in that they're not going to use that against us? Because there is this paranoia these days of knowledge is power. Okay, sure. Like, knowledge is like, oh my God, like it's, like I look at our data analytics. I mean, to truly be successful, you need to know what the data says. You need to have the knowledge of what to do with those insights, and to be a successful entrepreneur or be. So yeah, I understand that knowledge is so impactful. But at what point, who can we be vulnerable with? Who is in our trusted network that can actually help us through those things, and not worry about who's going to try to use that to kick me off the top of the mountain to get to the top of the mountain? So there's all these things that, like, so it's an incredible, like, how do you get your trusted network, and how do you get, who can you be vulnerable with? That partner I referred to that's retiring, Karen, she has been like so impactful for me, and just helping me focus that high energy that I have, and just, and coming up with crazy ideas that actually hold a lot of water. But how are we going to harness that? What are we going to do with it? And at her retirement speech the other night, she talked about all the people that were impactful for her over her incredible career. And like, one of those careers that, oh my God, if I could just get half that way, that would be a huge check in the success box. And she talked about her wolf pack and the other female leaders that they could sit, they could talk, they could get advice, that they could cry with, that they could be vulnerable with. And it was incredible to hear. And the fact was, everyone in that group are the most amazing leaders. Like, there's a reason why they've been as successful as they have. But the fact that they did it in that team environment, to support each other and to grow together. Because the fact is, none of our lives are easy, right? And there's always going to be times we're going to feel like we got punched in the gut or kicked down, and maybe we made a big mistake. Maybe it was just circumstance. It doesn't matter. How do we get up, and who's going to help us get back up? That's the sign of a good leader, of knowing how to get up, knowing who to help, who's going to help us get back up, and just keep moving on.
Yeah, that reminds me of like this quote by Marcus Aurelius, so the Stoic guy, and he says like this amazing thing that remind yourself what you've been through and what you've had the strength to endure. Because the truth is, like, every single person that you meet, he could have the happiest life, but he's still, or she is still fighting demons. There's still some battle over here that you don't see and they would never share, that they're fighting in silence. But you just got to tell yourself that, like, even those people, yourself, that you've been through worse at some point in life. Because life is like, you know, like a wave. It's never been like linear or in any way.
Yeah, there's things that we struggle through. We have those moments in life, those character moments. And I tell my young teams especially, don't be afraid to F up. Be afraid not to. You need to be in a safe environment. I mean, I'm not talking about don't go do something stupid intentionally, but if you make a mistake, own it. Ask for help. Learn from it. See what excellence looks like. Like if we give you a task and you're not sure what it is, and you don't have that vision of where you need to go, first, make sure you know what good looks like. And ask those questions so you have that vision or you can see it and you have that example. But more importantly, if you do struggle, you're going to have scars on our backs. We all have like those scars of falling down, skin knees or elbows or whatever that is. What did you learn from that? Like everything's a learning moment. Why did you fall down? What did you do wrong? What even if you feel you did everything right, I always like to joke, if you think you did everything right, then you need to take a step back, because that moment when you think everything is perfect is the moment when you have a blind spot. And so where is your blind spot? What did you do wrong? More importantly, what did you learn from it so you don't make the same mistake again? That definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and getting frustrated from it and not learning from it. You need to figure out how to act different.
Right. So before we move into the final phase of the podcast, and Nikhil will explain that to you, this last portion, you know what that reminds me of? I think we talked about this this quote or this saying when we met the first time as well, is that it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
It's better to fail. Better that you have scars. Just shows how much you've learned.
Yeah, I remember sharing the story of my dad sitting down. And my dad, I grew up where, you know, especially when I was older, like when I was in my 20s and afterwards. And I was always close with my family and my siblings. And Dad was one of my best friends, you know, especially when I was older. And we'd be sitting on the deck at the lake and having our coffee, and I'd be telling him all the mistakes I made, or oh my God. And I remember him saying, he's like, you were the one kid that I just can't believe you fall in a big pile of shite and always come out smelling like roses. And it's one of those, like, what are you learning from this? Like, how do you look at the glass half full and figure out the positivity in it? And, I've told my team, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is when something goes completely sideways, you fall into a new room, there's going to be new doors that you're going to be able to open that you didn't even know were there before. You're going to learn from this and all of a sudden realize I can open these 3 other doors and go a different path, whether in my career, in my specialty, or even just in what I learned about myself. And that's where, we need, like going back, don't be afraid to F up. Be afraid not to, because that's how you learn. So, yeah.
So, at the end of a podcast, we do like a rapid fire round.
Perfect.
Pranav's going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Okay.
And you have to answer in 1 word or 1 sentence.
I like to talk for 20 minutes at a time, but absolutely.
Now he's going to get salty.
Now I'm getting salty. What do you mean? Okay, no, absolutely. I'll do my best.
Okay, start off.
I was going to ask you to start off.
Okay, for sure. So, if you could make one rule that everyone on this earth had to follow, what would that be?
Sorry, everyone.
Everyone had to follow.
In this world.
In this world, one rule, what would that be?
Treat people like you want to be treated. Take care of each other.
The golden rule.
The golden rule. And that has nothing to do with faith in how we were raised. That applies to everyone. You said keep it short, so that's it.
Perfect. If you could go back in time and talk to your 20-year-old self, what one piece of advice would you give young David?
Yeah, buy that duplex that you should have bought for the price it was. I mean, there's always the real estate stuff. Or why didn't you buy Apple and Microsoft at the age of 20 and everything?
Buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Hey, there was no Bitcoin when I was 20. So, it's a great question. It's, I don't know if I'd want to change my path.
Oh, that's a good.
You know what I mean? Like, like science fiction geek here. Like, so I love the idea of, okay, you can write things and change your path. But I don't know if I'd really change anything because, one of my close friends, very well-respected Indigenous leader, and he told me something one day. And he says, you are where the Creator needs you to be. And I thought about that. Like, regardless of the journey of how we got here, there's a purpose for us. And there is something like we've talked about legacy in the past, and not only from, so much of it from my family, but just the impact we can make and the stories that need to be told. But there's still so much of the impact and story that's yet to be told. And I have no idea what the plan is for me moving forward. But I do believe there's so much more yet to achieve. And even though I can't see it, I know I'm on the right path. So I don't know if I'd want to go back other than just to make sure you remember to tell your family how much you care about them.
So, you know how everybody is chasing something, how everybody wants something. What does your treasure chest look like? What's inside there?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if treasure chest is a metaphor that I ever think about. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I want that stability and that comfort and that. But, if I think about what success looks like, is I can get home. That my treasure chest is a little different. I want to do well in my work, and I want to be successful.
It doesn't have to be money related.
But to me, I want to be able to lay down in my bed every night and know my family is safe. My friends know that I'm there for them. And I can go to bed with nothing, no cloud over top or nothing eating up my conscience. And I can go to bed. My family teases me because I can lay down in bed and watch TV, and I can flip my pillow. And after my pillow flip, I am out cold within 30 seconds because I go to bed at night with knowing that I have done everything that I should be doing in the most ethical way, in the most community-focused way, and one that supports my team, my corporate brand, my leaders, and my family. That's what I keep at the heart of my soul. I mean, that's what we need to do. And so, I can go to bed at night, be out cold, and sleep a solid 8 hours without a problem. That's my treasure chest.
What are you most grateful for in your life?
Oh my God. It's my family and how the support that I've gotten that has given me the values to embrace the opportunities that have been in front of me. If my brother didn't teach me how to be, how to communicate and how to be like outgoing, like my brother taught me so much. I got the older brother that I just have grown up admiring. And even though we've gone completely different career paths, and he's incredibly successful in what he does. My sister is incredibly successful in what she does, but just taught me to, help me grow in my personality. My parents taught me the values that I hold true to myself. And all of those combined have just led to, embracing the opportunities in front. Like if I didn't have the confidence to go to CB Wilson years ago, God rest his soul, to say, CB, I want to do something with football. I want to do something at Taylor Field. I never would have got that opportunity. If I didn't get the opportunity to just, learn from all the jobs that built who I am, to just embrace, like, it was terrifying leaving government and going to private sector. I took a pay cut. I've got a young family at home. This could go well, but what if it goes sideways? What if I didn't really know these bosses that I was going to work with? And what if they were not the people I thought they were? And all of a sudden I'm unemployed in 6 months. What happens? So it's just, they taught. So I look at all that. It all comes down to how I was raised, the opportunities I had as a kid. And it was interesting. I talked to another a buddy that I grew up with. We played like competitive sports and basketball against each other. We see each other at this retirement event, and his wife knew the partner really well, and Craig knows him. And we talked about how incredible it was growing up together, playing those competitive sports, traveling, but the importance of team, the importance of support, and all the things we learned. He's coaching and I was coaching, and just what we try to instill in the kids that we coach, because that's important. And so it all just comes down to, there's always this common theme to all of it, is just, who are we learning from and what did we learn from them? I think of all the coaches that I've had over the years, and the ones that truly stood out are the ones that I look back that truly cared about the kids that they were coaching. It didn't matter if they made the last shot at the end of the game to win. It's who they were as people. I look at, one of my young basketball coaches, Rick Kurtz, he was a teacher. He didn't have kids, but he always spent time with the kids. And I remember he'd be drilling me in science questions as we're driving down to the States in this big van filled with kids, because he wanted me to keep pushing to be smarter and to keep learning into all these areas. And plus, we didn't have iPods and cell phones and all that. So we also needed time to talk. But, it's those type of leaders that spend the extra time. I look at teachers. The teachers, my wife is one of those teachers that, gets letters or notes or, messages from students like 10 years, 20 years after she taught them, saying, thank you for teaching me what you did. But more importantly, how you treated me with respect, the stuff that I learned, and just, you helped me be the person I am today. So everything that we learned, I had a great upbringing. Not necessarily it was always like, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, and, with great opportunities. And so I look at that as, yes, I had some privilege when I was growing up. I didn't grow up with a butler or a yard person or anything, but everything we learned was hard work. We learned how to mix concrete by hand with mixers. We learned how the importance of yard work. As soon as we were tall enough to push a lawnmower, we were grinding it out. And if you didn't do a good job, you'd do it again. And so we were taught those values of the importance of hard work and the importance of doing a good job. And all those things all combined up to who all my siblings and I are today.
If you had to go back in time, suppose it's 1915 and there's a captain of a ship and he's summoning up everyone. You get to decide where the voyage would go. Where would you want to go?
Well, it definitely wouldn't be the Titanic voyage. I'll say that. A couple of years off on your estimate, but it's a good question because honestly, it would. I mean, I love tropical cruises. I mean, heck, I'm wearing a cruise shirt from the Disney Cruise Line. I mean, the irony on that. Obviously, like, it would be somewhere exotic, but it would be somewhere where it's a different culture. I'd love to go somewhere that would just be taking me to somewhere to learn, somewhere warm, because I don't want to go somewhere cold. I live in cold lots enough. But just somewhere where the fruit would be different, the food would be different, the people would be different, so I could learn from. But at the core, we would, to be able to just, like, I've used the reference break bread, where I could just go sit down and break bread and just laugh and learn and listen That would be my cruise way back then. And if it ends up being something scientific that I could learn as well, the geek in me would be ecstatic. But
What is your why?
my why? Oh my God, that's that is a great question. Again, it kind of is a common theme that we've talked about throughout this, is everything I do is like, why do I climb the mountain the way I do? Why do I strive to achieve new things or push myself to be better? Number one, I love continuous education, just continuous learning. I've thought about doing my doctorate. I did my first degree at University of Regina. I did my MBA out of the US, and I love learning. I'm in a job where I learn, so much. It's continuously changing. So, I mean, we always evolve within ours. But, there's the learning aspect and the striving to be better. But at the end of the day, it's an impact. And it's also am I living a life that my kids will look at, someday and look back and say, Dad really made the best out of what he was given. And he made an impact and showed us so many really cool things and so many opportunities. One of my, my regrets in a little bit of a way, but I'm so glad the way it worked out and I still wouldn't change it, is I didn't know what was out in the world when I was picking my career. And how I ended up here where I am, I have no idea. In all honesty, I get a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. How the hell did I end up as managing partner of Deloitte in Saskatchewan? And I wish I knew that there was this world called consulting. I wish there was these other opportunities. I wish I learned about, so many things earlier. But now it's a matter of, I look at where the why of what I do is, how do we make things better? How do I make my work environment better for me, for my teams, for, just all, like, for my clients? How do I make that more enjoyable? How do I make it better? How do I ensure that we're providing value at the end of the day? But more importantly is, how do I fill the bucket when it comes down to making sure there's a balance between my family, my work life, and myself? Because again, I don't want to suffer in silence. We've all struggled at times, whether, from a mental health perspective, from a self-worth perspective, from a, am I doing what I should be doing perspective. There's always questioning. There's always that voice. Everybody gets it, regardless of it, no matter what level they're at. Don't ever think, oh yeah, that leader's got their shit together. Yeah, that person, they know what they're doing. They know they don't have a voice of self-doubt. Everybody has self-doubt. Is how are you answering, how are you dealing with that? Are you healthy? Because that's even just that comment. Are you spiritually healthy? Are you mentally healthy? Are you physically healthy? There's so much to it. And we do get those tough challenges in life. And we've had, like, there's a whole other podcast when it comes down to, I could take different points in my lifetime where they were the hardest times in my entire life. And people may or may not have known, in the work environment and family or friends, but just to be able to know that, I'm bringing the best of what I can and doing the best I can. But the why? Community, family, everything we do.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, David, for joining us with this amazing podcast. This is the longest podcast we've ever done. Because
I talk too much. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's not that. You have so much experience, and you have so much experience around different fields. Honestly, I wanted to talk to you a lot about AI and the tech stuff, but we'll have another podcast.
We can do another podcast of that, because that's I'd love to. That'd be great.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, guys, I'll share. Thank you, because I will share with you. Again, it's one of those moments of when you think of that gesture. And when I asked you a question. And I'll even just throw it back to you. Why are you guys doing this podcast? It's not rhetorical. Why are you guys doing this podcast? What's the vision for this podcast? Like, what do you want to talk about? Do you remember what you told me?
Yeah. So we believe in the idea that everyone is like a walking book and everybody has a story to tell. And it's not just us that we want to hear the stories. We want to spread those stories around the world. It comes back to the community thing that, like when probably like 200, 300 years ago, everybody had a tradition where at night, the elders would share their stories to youngers, or they have like a campfire.
Campfire.
This is our campfire.
Pranav, and then I asked you a question right after that. I asked you, why me? Do you remember what you said?
Because you're just too magnetic.
And you talked about the first time that we met was at campus recruiting.
Exactly.
So I went home, I told my wife that. When I told her what you guys said and how much that meant to me. Because just to hear that, sometimes there's perception of what we try to portray and versus how it's received. There was a time in my life where my brother sat me down and said, Dave, everything is coming up, Dave, but you're kind of coming across as a cocky little shit. And we talked about that. And to hear with what your comment of how the magnetic comment, and this is someone who really portrays an energy that this connection and everything else, it meant a lot. So even a simple little comment that you made a big impact on me, my day, that I even shared with my wife that day. So guys, I love what you're doing, and thanks for including, and thanks for allowing me to be part of this. I loved it.
In the end, the all thanks goes to you. And you're making us feel really amazing, but thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. And we're definitely seeing you part 2 for the podcast.
Would love to. Thanks, fellas.